Julie, the sofa is open.
Nobody's on the stool.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for what I am confident is going to be an incredibly informative and I hope energizing conversation. And I often like to say, not just about EdTech, not just about technology, not just about entrepreneurship, but about education. And beyond that, about what it means, each in our own unique and individual ways, to make a difference in the lives of millions and millions of students and prospective students and soon-to-be students all around the world. That is obviously core to our mission here at Southern New Hampshire University and very much what we think about daily here in the Sandbox ColLABorative, which I have the privilege of directing along with a phenomenal team. I suspect you've seen Lisa Bonacci and others of us sort of wandering around. My name is Brian Fleming, and again, as I said, work here in the Sandbox ColLABorative, which serves in many respects as a hub of innovation and strategy for our university. We regularly conduct research, whether market studies, analysis, sort of helping our university continue to make sense of all of the transformation and trends happening around us, in addition to hosting this very beautiful space and facilitating design thinking workshops and other efforts to help support innovation within our university, but beyond. We have sort of a dual mission, if you will, to be both of service to our university, but also to be very embedded and to drive innovation within the greater New England area, which is why we were so excited to have this conversation today. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, please come talk to me, or you can view our website, sandboxcollaborative.org, online. And we are very much looking forward to partnering with each of you here and continuing to drive this conversation. I personally hope we have far more of these events, and we continue to drive what I think is not just an interesting but a critical conversation at this moment in our industry and in our world. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Gray Chenoweth to kick us off.
Great. Thanks, Brian. A round of applause for Sandbox. So you definitely did not come to hear from me, so I'll just keep it short and sweet. This was kind of the brainchild of a couple of folks, Liz Gray from Live Free and Start, the Sandbox ColLABorative, because I think, and myself, who'd seen more and more investment opportunities that were local in the EdTech space, and that's why I was thrilled to partner with SNHU, because when you think of pillar companies in an industry, in an area, it's SNHU is such a fantastic example. Incredibly disruptive, amazing growth. They've got 2,000 people working in Manchester, serving students around the world, and I think because of that, in some ways, at least 3 of the folks up here even have a connection to SNHU. A couple of you guys have business deals with them. Angela, I know that you worked prior to your current gig, worked at a company that had an affiliation with SNHU. And each one of them, I think, have a fantastic relationship to the state. And you'll hear more about what their companies do, and they're all touching kind of different parts of the educational spectrum. I think we invested in Matt Guruge's company. His company was Awato, got an investment from the Millworks Fund. Same thing with Pulse, and same thing with David at uConnect. So there's some great investment opportunities. We tried to have Angela pitch us in the spring, but she's waiting for the fall to pitch, because I made the mistake of saying, come to us after you had your first check, and of course we really should have been your first check.
Thank you.
But
Everybody heard that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally on record now.
Yeah.
Public meeting, yeah. So anyways, thank you all for coming. I think it's an amazing event, amazing space. Will be an amazing conversation with people that are really disrupting, bringing disruptive technology to education, which, as we know, is not the fastest of movers when it comes to tech. And so, while most startups have a Herculean task, these guys have even more challenges because they're changing an industry that is so steeped in tradition. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jean, who will take the rest of it. But thank you all for coming. Thanks to the companies presenting. Thank you for coming up here And I hope you'll be sharing a little bit about LearnLaunch too, so
Yep.
everyone understands how it fits into the ecosystem. But thank you very much, and now on with the good stuff.
Okay, great.
All
I'm
right.
actually mic'd up, so. Hi, folks. My name is Jean Hammond, and I'm a co-founder and partner at LearnLaunch here down in Boston. And we see ourselves as a super regional entity to work around education, specifically around New England. And so I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this. As in every event where we get a chance to showcase companies, the main event is to get over to hear their stories, to hear how they're progressing against growing. But I think we felt that it would be helpful to look a little bit at EdTech as an industry. And so I'm going to look a little bit at EdTech entrepreneurship trends. And as usual, I have the problem where instead of doing what I say to the companies, not too many slides and not too many words on each slide. I have the problem of having found some great slides from some other parties in the last 24, 48 hours to put in here that have too many words on them. So I'm going to excuse myself in advance. So lots of times people start a presentation about EdTech with a picture of a classroom that looks exactly like a classroom from over 100 years ago. And there are a lot of classrooms that look like that. They persist in all of the institutional parts of education. But the story about EdTech is actually a lot bigger than that. It's a story about change in the forms and the behaviors of the entities that are doing education, whether it be universities like the one that we're situated in here, or whether it be the classroom. And there's also a lot of change that's happening outside of the classroom, because the last time you wanted to learn something, you probably went to YouTube and figured out how to sear scallops or whatever it was you were trying to figure out. It wasn't the places and entities we learn in. So I've decided to start these slides with an example of an industry that's highly integrated, and you would think that all the components of that supply chain were unbreakable, that there wasn't a place for entrepreneurship. But actually, entrepreneurship can happen anywhere, and in EdTech it is happening everywhere. And so this first slide is really to show the sort of the silliness of what happens when you take an entity that is supposedly incredibly well integrated. All of the components of how FedEx does their business. Who knew there were lots of places where startups could swarm in and start to pull things apart? So the good news is this is happening everywhere, and the good news is it's happening in EdTech, and it's happening with more and more financial support in EdTech. And in general, what we're talking about here are companies that for one reason or another can't grow 100% on their own revenues because either they have a slow start, which is very common if you're selling to institutions like K-12 or universities in education or other things. And so we'll be looking at how do we get some of this funding to happen, and a little bit about both angel and venture funding in the space of EdTech. So what's going on? EdTech is a really big market already, and it's addressing a gigantic market, right? The paid education in the world is way, that's countable, is way over $5 trillion, and in the U.S. over $1.4 trillion. Now that includes the classroom and the teacher and all the important things that are a part of this and that will never be replaced by technology. But technology is coming in quite rapidly and can start to affect how those jobs are done, how to make the people who are working in education more effective. And interestingly, recently people are focusing even more and more on government and talent as a component of the education system, because people are finding employers aren't being able to find the employees they want, so they're investing in the type of training that will help give them that. And as we look at the society, we understand that we need to invest in more workforce training so that there can be more jobs for more people. So basically, it's a story about a whole lot of opportunity. What we're in the middle of here is a physical to digital transition. So, you know, just a few years ago, the college textbook market was humongous. And at this point in time, it's hugely collapsed. And people have moved to digital delivery of the content, and that digital transition is happening everywhere, and that really changes. And then we change where we learn. Back to the YouTube example, or what's happening in that STEM after-school camp, and what's happening in all of the other entities that might be out there with things like General Assembly or whatever that are sort of additions to the education market that didn't used to happen. As soon as we get digital, guess what we get? We get global. So this is a story about many of these products being able to reach around the world and make a big difference around the world. And I know that's in the plans here at Southern New Hampshire, so a very exciting time. So the suppliers are changing too. The entrenched publishers don't really hold the turf. New people are coming up. Education has, New England has always been a significant supplier of education with some of the major publishers in the world located in New England and others around here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about demand, which is consolidating to form emerging markets. Education and EdTech can actually contribute employees to all industries, and so is a fundamental part of all aspects of entrepreneurship. Oops. So here's one of these too busy slides, but basically what it's saying is that increasingly, when you look at the spend in EdTech, it's in the post-secondary and the enterprise and professional learning. K-12, although it's actually becoming a very organized market, is less in total volume. And there's been phases that each of these industries have gone through. So enterprise and professional learning has deep roots, but it's going through change at sort of a slower rate. The trend in corporate training and talent management is all about skills matching. So we're looking at artificial intelligence and other capabilities to be able to do deeper matching of who's got the skill, who needs it, and how do we put it together. The trend in higher ed has been quite dramatic. Obviously, we're standing in one of the major disruptors in the world, and yet we also have a whole lot of universities that still run pretty similar to how they did 60 years ago. And so, what we're seeing in many places is that the data is still in silos, and so we're in the stage of the digital transition in higher ed, of trying to combine the silos to get deep views into what's going on so that we can help with student persistence, we can help with student matching to appropriate careers, and we can make sure that the right kinds of supports are delivered. And then down here in K-12, you know, 5 years ago when I founded LearnLaunch, we couldn't stop ourselves from seeing another math app. But today, special needs and some interesting project-based learning tools are the new trends. And perhaps more importantly, districts are transforming themselves, and charter schools and private schools as well, into being a real market for bringing on digital information. So what we're really at is we're really at a stage where the last 5 years in EdTech have been all about the early adopters, everybody running around trying things, and now we're starting to get the organization on the other side of the chasm that really create markets, and that makes investors, of course, very happy because, hey, if there's markets, we can help form that. So this slide has too much information on it, but I thought I would point out 3 really big trends that are happening. The first, perhaps reading from this side, is that with brain science and neuroscience, we can actually see the sticking of a memory and the problem of information acquisition in a learner today. And so we actually know what works. We can measure it. And that's a brand new story. And then on top of that, we're trying to bring in new ways of helping the interface that the student works with, whether it be a tablet, whether it be virtual reality to learn welding or other things, is actually changing relatively fast. And all this is happening in a world where we're more digital, so of course we've got more data, so we can do more artificial intelligence. It's a very complex market. This is just one investment banker's view of the K-12 instructional chain and the student and teacher tools in K-12, just to show that these are not unoccupied spaces. When a startup comes in, they have to move to these spaces. The quick news is that although the amount of investment dollars went down to about 2.3 billion last year globally, it is actually on an uptrend for this year. This is the U.S. specific dollars for investing. And the categories are all over the map, but certainly we are seeing a whole lot of investment in lots of categories. In the last 5 years, there have been some serious exits, and so it's really a story about there really being some markets here. Another way to look at the exit story is that some of the traditional exit players, such as Pearson, Hogan Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, have been doing less acquisitions recently, but there certainly are a number of exits. It's a complex and busy investor landscape, and getting to navigate it is actually a bit of a challenge. In fact, I'll show you in the next slide the way we think about it, which is working with really early stage companies. We find that a lot of them are encountering a really serious capital gap, trying to get over to the increasing number of Series A players who are EdTech specialists. Interestingly, a serious impact track of funding is emerging and is an important way of putting important societal results into the mix of society. So this is really a good story to say that it's really important to understand that when we look at getting across that gap, that the angel networks are really important. And this is just a story, and not about EdTech specifically, but about the total amount of dollars spent on supporting innovation. And also to just get a visual on where does that go in terms of number of deals. So really, when you look at the companies that are getting funding, the emergence of the angel networks and angel groups are incredibly important. When you think about what these companies are going through, they're actually going through a maze called good luck. I hope you can find a path through this slide. And that's kind of what they're needing to go through to try to understand all of the different ways of getting a company up to the stage where you're able to get it to its full potential. And so we're really just sort of here to do this. So so now I'm going to give a 1.5 minute paid advertising for LearnLaunch, just to help you understand how LearnLaunch as a regional player here in New England can be a part of growing EdTech in particular around the region. So we have an accelerator, a campus, and our institute, which is our nonprofit. Our campus has about 35 EdTech companies in it, sharing space. Sometimes it's pitching afternoon for beers, just because people like to have fun. This afternoon, we'll have about 200 teachers come through to see about 25 K-12 oriented EdTech startups in a showcase. So they're here in town for another conference, and we've set up for the community to come and see them. So just a great space to see what's going on. Come down. We have about a class every week or so, and we put on a large major conference each year. This coming February, it will be February 1st and 2nd at the Hines. We also do a couple of nonprofit activities. The accelerator puts a lot of support into both market entry-level companies under a program we call Boost, and then Breakthrough is for companies that are a little further along. So let's get through these quickly, and so we work on all the different sides of this. This is just a story to say that, hey, in New England here, we've got, just on the supplier side, without even getting into the innovative deliverers of education, a lot of players here. And we've been growing LearnLaunch for about 5 years. So it's been a lot of fun. But now I have the honor of moderating this panel and helping us see companies that are actually going through some of these trends and hearing their stories from where they are, asking them a few questions and seeing what they're up to. So we're going to start out with each of them taking about 1 to 2 minutes, telling us, what does their company do, why did they found it, and about where they are in their journey. And then we'll dig in on a few more questions of trends and aims and like that. Why don't you take us away, Terren?
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Terren. I'm the CEO of Pulse, and we are a survey platform designed to help high schools and colleges understand their student body in a very data-driven way. So we started off as a project at Dartmouth College, trying to figure out how do we get more students to respond to surveys. And since we started last fall, our average response rate to our surveys hovers around 50% of the student body. Before us, the number was around 6%. And we have an active user base of 95% of students. And so what's next for us is to expand to other colleges and high schools. And in the fall, we plan to be on every Ivy League campus. And why I'm doing this, the idea came after a campus-wide protest where I realized that there was no reliable source of public opinion information on campus, and I wanted to create that with Pulse.
David, tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, cool. So my name is... Very sorry about that. Sorry, guys. I can just speak loudly. It's all good. Yeah, no, it's okay. So my name is David Kozhuk. I'm the founder and CEO of uConnect. It's really a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit of background, I started the company in late 2013 based on personal experience. So I was working for a small private equity firm based in Boston, and went to go recruit students at my alma mater for that private equity firm. When I got to campus, only 4 students showed up to the information session. I was literally handing out jobs to private equity at state school amidst a recession or depression or whatever it was. And students didn't know about the event. Very few showed up, and the few that showed up were unprepared. And so at that point, I sort of realized that the lack of engagement in career services and career programs is having a really profound impact on student success and also ultimately institutional effectiveness. We launched uConnect about 6 months later, what we do is we help schools unlock the valuable resources and information that live in the Career Center to impact the entire student life cycle. So impacting enrollment, retention, and career readiness, of course. The way that we do that is through a marketing platform that helps schools embed local career resources, data, student success stories into every aspect of the student journey. The ultimate goal is to make sure that students enroll with a vision, persist with purpose, and graduate with the skills and confidence that they need to launch their career. We're working with about 40, 50 institutions, including Southern New Hampshire University, and really excited about the path forward. Working in education technology right now is super exciting, so happy to be here.
So we have one company that works in K-12, so why don't you tell us a bit about it?
Hi, I'm Angela Addison. I'm co-founder of EDACS, which stands for Education Access and Support. And what we do is we built an app on the Salesforce platform that serves schools that have high populations of high-risk students with special needs, behavioral and emotional counseling. So all the services outside of curriculum that kids need and that schools are doing, but don't have tools to do it. And the reason we started it was because I built it actually probably about 5 years ago for a private college. It was such a huge need, embarrassing such a large percentage of their population, and it's persistence and retention risk for them. So for colleges, it's revenue. For K through 12, they have the same issues, and teachers are drowning, and so it's a risk for the student, and they're also losing special ed teachers. The average turnaround for a special ed teacher is 3 years in the industry, and they move on to something else because they're just set up to fail. So we did it because it makes a difference. I have a son in the system, so I have a personal connection. I'd already done it, so I invited to one of my partner to talk me through it. And it just seems like we keep meeting more and more people every time we start the conversation and we have a forum with schools. We hear that it's a need and want to talk to us.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I'm Matt, and our company is called Awato, as in a way to something better. A little about me, I went to a small liberal arts school, majored in English. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Did that for 3 years, and then I tried journalism. I realized I didn't like either of those, so I stumbled into my senior year, really afraid. And that moment never left me, so that's why we started Awato, to help people figure out what they want to do with their lives at those crucial moments. The way we do that is with an assessment that learns and adapts to you, and then other features like resume builder and pathways that show you actually how you can take the information we give you and get yourself a job. That's what we do.
Okay, great. So now we have a sense of what they do, and we'll try to get a sense of kind of the environment they live in. So really, sales to education entities, and all of these folks are selling to institutions that do education. Are often fraught with confusion. It's kind of the problem of finding the pin in the haystack. There might be a committee that only meets on alternate Thursdays under full moons, and they have to review you before a decision can get made. And so it's a particularly hard thing. So when you started your company, how did you imagine that sales would go? And as you progressed, how is it going? And also comment about the extent to which there are groups making decisions. So why don't we start this way?
Yeah, sure. So I started off thinking that I would go to the college administration and say that each year you guys spend $50,000 on Qualtrics, which is the current survey platform. We have a survey platform that students actually enjoy using, and soon we're going to be able to do everything that Qualtrics do. Would you like to pay us some sort of money for that? And they said, oh, why don't you talk to this person, talk to that person, set up a lot of meetings, and then realize that, okay, they might be willing to spend money for this, but it's going to be in like 4 months, 5 months maybe. And so what shifted from that was realizing that I realized then that I didn't want to be in the enterprise sales business. So I tried to figure out what was a way where we could break up Pulse, our service, into kind of bite-sized amounts for a university or school. So instead, now school organizations within the school just pay to use us on a per survey basis. And if they want, they can pay for a license agreement, and what that will give them is access to our entire database, the easy-to-use dashboard. But so the first thing I realized was exactly what you're talking about, how slow-moving it was. So trying to get around that by being a little bit more nimble.
Okay, so chunk up the buyers into bite-sized pieces and sell them one by one.
And then also set it up on their campus before actually trying to sell it to them.
Yeah.
That's
So
another.
that basically somebody who really needs the tool can get it.
Yeah, it's much easier to sell. I've found that it's much easier to sell it by just saying that, all your students are already using this. Would you guys like to run a survey, as opposed to saying that we could do this. We're going to come to your campus. So, yeah.
And how about you, David? Who are you selling to, and how's it going?
So it's going well. It's funny you asked, how did it differ from when you started? I mean, I actually, so on the heels of that experience that I mentioned, started working with my alma mater to help them engage students with career services, and had a successful sort of pilot program. It was just like a passion project at that time. I was working in Waltham at the time, and I went down to Bentley University to tell them what we were doing, and they were like, where do we sign? And so I actually had 2 clients using platform. It wasn't really a platform then, but it was a tool, before we even launched before we can really officially launch the company. So I was like, we're going to have 100 schools at the end of the year, no problem. And it has been a little bit slower than that. But it's been awesome working with college and university administrators. I think one of the things that we found early and often is that schools had a lot of interest in what we were doing, but the Career Center wasn't necessarily funded in the way that it should be. And that's changed a little bit, but not a lot, in my opinion. And so I think what we've found that has really accelerated our growth is really talking to different folks in different parts of the university who are all focused on student success and making sure that they're supporting students around outcomes. I think that has proven is sort of a clear alignment between the Career Center's goals and upper administration's goals. And if everybody's in the room sort of talking about that, then there'll be more budget support. So we've taken the committee approach, and it's taken a little bit longer, but we've found a lot more success.
So K-12 is notoriously hard, but there is usually a special needs administrator. Is that where you start?
There is, and actually out of the gate, we wanted them to do K-12 for the secondary segment because we thought it would be a much easier sell to higher ed because they would have more money, and K-12 traditionally has to deal with supplying data to the state anyway, so they have to use their apps, and there's just more red tape. But amazingly, we're just so surprised we haven't run into any issues. We had 2 people tell us that finding the money is their #1 priority for the years to solve the issue of tracking special needs students. And they didn't care if it came out of the budget. We've had, we went to beta last month. I think I'm much earlier than the rest of these guys, so we're a little bit different. We only formed at the end of the year. We were part of the Alpha program in the spring cohort. We just went to beta last month. So we're working with 4 beta clients. 3 have committed for the fall, which is great and more than we anticipated. And we've got other people calling us already that we would have never thought of, like nonprofit organizations, community centers that manage high-risk populations of students outside of school and after-school programs and things like that. We're working with, down at UNH, the Institute on Studying Disabilities has hooked us up with a group of people who, they round up corporate entities to place people after they graduate from college with special needs into positions, but they have no way of tracking them after that. So we would have never thought corporate, but I guess it makes sense. So it really hasn't, we haven't found any issues at all yet.
That's great. All right. How about it, Matt? How are things going?
Things are going reasonably well, but I can't say that we went with no issues. To give you an idea, when we started, we thought we were going to build 2 things. We were going to build assessments, and we were going to build roadmaps, and we'd sell them for $5 a student. I went to the first school that wanted to talk to us, and the director there kind of sat back in his chair and went, great, you built 1 good thing. I'm going to need 6 of those. I'm going to give you $1 to $2 a student. So our math was just totally off. But what we found is when you're able to build a big enough platform and sell at a low enough price, you can create value sort of across the spectrum. So whether you're selling to a president, a provost, or a career director, you can sell something to them, and then you can get deals through. But the biggest surprise was how much value we had to supply at one price.
Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about timing? So for people who don't know, Christmas comes in July for education because in July most universities and most K-12 systems lock their budget down for the next year, and so there's lots of seasonality that tends to happen. So maybe we'll start with you, Matt, and come back across this way. How do you communicate about the seasonal issues, maybe to your team, maybe to your investors? How do you think ahead to make it people need phases and all that stuff?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So just so everyone understands, what she essentially means about that is you have, compared to a different company where you have 4 sales cycles every quarter, in EdTech you have 1. It ends in September every year, and then you sell throughout the whole time, and then it ends in September again. And how do you kind of deal with your team around that? And there are sort of 2 answers to this. I think the first part is you can get traction throughout your sales cycle starting as soon as the last one ended, where you can start people integrating, get them excited, and get them demoing it. And I think the second part is to have them building something that you're going to sell the next year. So you're essentially, every year during this sales cycle, we're going to come out with something new that we're going to sell. And that's going to keep our investors engaged because we're telling our investors, this is what we're going to have for the next thing. It keeps our customers engaged because we're saying this is what we're going to have. And it keeps the team building something. So that's sort of how we approach that.
So it's a bit early for a company in beta to talk about sales cycles, but
although it's, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we've already got plans for what we're going to be adding on to our next phase after we get some schools on board in the fall. Like I said, we're working with some folks on the research side of it, the Institute of Disabilities, to try to get data into what we need to be measuring so that we can prove that, we know that people tell us it makes a difference and that it's more efficient and they can succeed and it reduces staff and overhead, but we want the data to show that the kids are succeeding more with real solutions in place. So that'll be our next phase, is to do the analytics piece of it. But we are early to deal with, I guess, downtime, and we've had a lot of interest, and we've got people that we honestly just don't, it's 2 of us. We don't have time to do all the installs and get them up and running yet, so we haven't had to deal with the dry spell.
And how about you, David?
So seasonality is a real thing from my perspective. I think we've learned to really embrace seasonality in higher ed. I think it's all about communication and managing expectations with everybody involved in the process. So with our teams, when there's going to be a lot of work, like it's July right now, and schools are preparing for the fall, and our support team is getting a ton of requests right now. And so making sure that doesn't, come out of left field is really important for our team. When we talk to investors, we sort of lean towards investors who understand the education market, because they can pay they really valuable on a day-to-day basis, and they also understand some of the pains. And then when we talk to schools, we truly have learned to embrace their process. Everybody's got a process. Some move fast, most move slow, and so we really kind of communicate a lot up front about how can we support your process. What does your process look like? What is your ideal timeline? I think a lot of times earlier on we're just like, hey, you ready? You ready? You ready? And it's more like, let's show some empathy. Let's understand that they have a process and how it works, and and make sure that we're not, that we're all aligned.
Yeah, seasonality is not really a problem for us right now. I guess the schools that were at Dartmouth and the schools we plan to expand to in the near future, the discretionary funds they have to do surveys would be sufficient and probably add up to at least a license agreement, if not more. So I am not really finding that we need to have a big push to be that and wait and try to get into people's budgets in July. Another thing is that our revenue models, our money is not just coming from schools, so we're not just solely dependent on universities or high schools.
Okay, so earlier in my presentation, I talked about some of the emerging threads that are going on in education, and some of the themes, and so maybe we'll let people take a whack at those. Maybe I'll start down with you to ask about in K-12. I think one of the things the audience might like to know is that when we started LearnLaunch about 5 years ago, probably the average K-12 classroom in America, or the number of K-12 classrooms in America that had enough bandwidth to deliver online learning products into the classroom, it's probably somewhere between 8 and at the very highest estimate, maybe 10%. And right now, it's probably about 85 or 90% of the K-12 classrooms in America have enough bandwidth that they can actually do that. So whatever we've been doing in EdTech, it certainly has combined a lot of networking gear. And now people are trying to decide what to do with that networking gear. Does your product require a network to be live when it's in use? And what else have you found as you think about sort of trends and your product?
So one of the biggest advantages of our product for schools is that it's hosted. They don't have super on-site. They don't need servers. And a lot of what's really ramping up is schools going to the cloud for their apps because it's much more cost effective. They really can't do client server apps anymore. So we can leverage that as a selling point. I think a lot of what's happening is more curriculum based, and we talked about that earlier, but in talking to people, what we have noticed, and I think it is due to the accessibility of apps in the cloud for K-12 schools, is that where SIS packages and LMS packages were traditionally more geared towards higher ed, K through 12 are really picking up on that and starting to install and use them and want the data on their students and want those analytics.
So Matt, you talked about the need to bring out different modules each year to satisfy different buyers. Do you think of that as part of the trend of sort of bringing the data from all the different silos together, or is it just sort of different buyers, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I might take it down a little bit different path on sort of the emerging part, because like the features we need to do support the biggest problems colleges have. And the biggest problems colleges have right now are the same problems you guys hear about every day. People are afraid about automation. There are all these new jobs and all these old jobs that are disappearing, and we aren't aligning people correctly. And we have academic programs that could align people properly, but people don't know about them. I'll give you like a concrete example of how this ends up happening. There's a community college just on the seacoast here called Great Bay Community College. They have this advanced composite manufacturing program where every student that does it gets a job making about $50,000 to $70,000 after only 2 years. There's so much demand for these students that companies from other states are calling in. But there aren't even enough students here to fill the jobs in this state because these new manufacturing jobs aren't what they used to be and they need to have this certification. That program has 200 seats. Last year they filled 50. So at our company we call that a triple loss. It's actually what a lot of our modules try and attack, where you look first at the high school student. There were tons of students in New Hampshire that are going to end up being underemployed in jobs that they are much too bright to be in. It would have been great for that program. You have Great Bay Community College, who has this amazing program that they invested all this money into, and they're going to lose tuition on it. And then you have the employers in the state who are begging to pay young people good money to stay in the state, and there aren't people for that. So when I think about what's happening in education right now, and you actually hear this from pretty much every college we talk to, is how are we going to solve that problem? Because colleges are that credentialing, they are the bridge between the people not knowing what they want to do and people actually getting a job. And I think the biggest trend is trying to figure out how to work people through that pathway.
Wow, that's a big mission. And David, how about you? What trends or influences have you seen?
So we've seen a lot of trends. I mean, so I'll talk about two quickly. One is, I think career services is being looked at differently at different campuses, and I think that common trend generally is that schools are thinking about how to more effectively integrate career services into other parts of the student experience. And so the last 3 schools that we've signed have completely merged academic advising and career advising. So they're in one building, one aligned plan, and they're helping students on both the curricular and the career side together, which makes a lot of sense because I think in a lot of cases students going to one person for academic support and then they were going to another person for career support, and those 2 people weren't necessarily talking to each other. So it wasn't necessarily the best solution for students. So I think we're finding that. We're seeing some schools integrate career services into advancement, which makes a lot of sense because there's a whole host of alums that can be valuable for students, and so having deeper connection between alums and students makes a lot of sense. And then also on the enrollment side is another trend. So schools integrating career service enrollment. So that's really interesting because I think career services are benefiting from that by having more resources, and then the students are definitely benefiting by making sure that careers becomes a part of their daily student experience. And then the other thing that, because we're here, it makes a lot of sense, and it's a huge trend that we're seeing, is the emergence of continuing education and adult education. I mean, so New Hampshire University has been a leader in the space for what seems like a really long time, but now there's actually a trend of a lot of schools kind of creating continuing ed and adult ed programs because, as Matt sort of alluded to, the labor markets are changing pretty quickly. I think the stat is like students who are graduating in the year or in 2017 are going to have as many as 15 different jobs, are going to work till they're 70 years old, and that's a good thing. Like they want to work till they're 70 years old and be learning skills throughout their lives. So the group at the group at Southern New Hampshire University figured that out a long time ago. I think about what schools are, and so they're trying to figure out how to support adults who don't come to campus, and adults who have very different needs than traditional students. So that's interesting.
Yeah, certainly the impact of the online student an online learner and a competency-based learner is really huge.
Huge shift, yeah.
Just a gigantic
Yeah.
earthquake. So how are we going to hear about those students and what they think and get all those opinions out? What kind of trends are you seeing, or what are you thinking about?
Well, I guess like the trend that we're kind of riding right now is just this hunger for schools, institutions to make just more data-driven decisions. I think so. Like right now, when it comes to public opinion, trying to make like a data-driven decision, the option is to do a survey of the entire student body, asking them at the end of the term, like, how did your term go? And maybe your response rate is high enough to actually have some real takeaways from that. But meanwhile, what Pulse is trying to do is get people in the mindset of assessment should be something that you should be doing every day, and you should be able to have a statistical lens into your student population on any topic at a moment's notice. And so with Pulse, we're doing surveys on a daily basis on a variety of topics. Some of our topics are being generated by students, what students want to know. Some of it is coming from just different organizations within the school, and it's all in one place. And that's a really important part of what we're doing. Where surveys used to live in just silos, you download the CSV and then you lose it forever. With Pulse, we're able to cross-reference between all surveys that we're doing, and each student has a profile. And so we're able to see how opinions are changing over time. And not only are we able to just have like longitudinal data, we're also able to do it within in a social context. So something that we're working on right now is allowing schools to understand how their students' social networks influence their experience. So by pulling information from social media sites and other sort of metrics, we're able to construct a social network map of their entire school and project public opinion data onto that. And so that schools can actually understand how a particular policy is being received or how it's affecting different friend groups around the school. So the trend is, yeah, people want to make data-driven decisions, but like what I realized is that just sounds good, and the current option out there is to get a CSV, I keep saying that word, just get a spreadsheet and try to make a decision based off of that. And that's not really, that takes a lot of work to make a data-driven decision based off of static results from the survey. So that's what we're trying to do.
That sounds like it's going to give people a lot more insight. So I can think of some other places to use that kind of insight. So we're going to get to some audience questions in a minute, but I have one or two more here. So let's talk a little bit about how you think about measuring effectiveness of your product, in terms of either changing. I think you've just touched on it individually. You just keep going, changing sort of the student life and also changing behavior in the institution. Go on this way.
Yeah, in terms of measuring the effectiveness of Pulse, I mean, we're completely focused on how much the students are enjoying using it, because that's our major selling point, that students organically come and take surveys on our platform. It's not a matter of chasing them down with survey links. So what we look at when we're figuring out if we're being successful is how many students are logging on each day, what is our average response rate, are students enjoying the experience, are students talking about our survey data in social contexts? And so those are our metrics for success, because once you have that, then sure, any administrator would be happy to see what students are talking about.
And what kind of metrics do you use?
So when we first started out, we thought we would, foolishly thought that we would be measuring ourselves by outcomes, right? By job placement. I think what we found is that there's so many different variables that affect job placement that that there were better ways to measure the efficacy of our product at a particular institution. And I think what we've found is that a lot of the schools that we talked about have a ton of conviction about how they're supporting students, their career service delivery model, and their support throughout the student journey. And so the way that we measure it quite simply is engagement in that model. And so engagement in utilization of resources, participation in programs, applications to internships and jobs, number of coaching sessions with career advisors and things like that. So when we talk to a school in sort of procurement process, we asked them to identify measurable KPIs that would deem success in a year, and then we, measure that, progression towards
Try to
success.
improve your renewal rate by having KPIs that are meetable.
That's right. That's right. And transparency. Otherwise, it's like you get a year in for renewal, and you're like, I like your tool and it works well, so yeah, let's go. But also, hey, budgets are getting tighter, and like I just like your tool. I don't know how it's having an impact. So setting those measurable KPIs before you even sign a contract is something for our team also.
Great. And how about you? Pretty early days, but what are you thinking about in terms of measurable outcomes to look at, or other ways to measure what's useful?
Yeah, persistence and retention rates for sure. That's the theory, and that's what we're trying to prove. As I mentioned, we're going to be working with some folks that are experienced in that area to help us come up with some compliance stats that we should build into the product, and then just feedback from an efficiency standpoint.
I think one of the things that we're finding in general is that investors are looking to see not only the financial metrics to look at the company, but also what's going on in terms of the outcomes or the impacts that the company's having. And so we're actually suggesting that the companies build a whole dashboard of various types of metrics. Some will be interesting to some investors, some will be interesting to others. But if your team understands that what you're doing has a number of different outcomes. I was at a session where Richard before was talking, he said, all investments have impact. It's just whether they have good impact or bad impact. So trying to help bring the language that's often exciting the younger investor and sometimes very influential large investors into the conversation early is particularly important in education, where there's been a kind of a confusion of what should be nonprofit, what should be paid, and yet a lot of money is being spent in education, and so trying to make sure that if we're spending it as effectively as possible is definitely one of the metrics that we're looking at as we possibly discuss these projects. So, how about you? What are you looking for when you think about metrics?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, we have multiple modules, so we track the pretty standard things like how many people complete assessments and apply for jobs and path they take. But I will say that while KPIs end up being really important, something we've noticed is that at the end of the day, when the schools think about renewing, KPIs are going to matter, but they're going to look at something intangible. People get into education because they love their students, and people buy our product because they see students use it and they see students love it, and people renew because they see students love it. So while there are all these important metrics that will show them, what we found is like the most important metric is like student delight. If you can delight a student and make them feel better about something that's scary, like career, that beats out the fact that we moved retention by 5%, or at least that's what we found.
Okay, any other comments you guys want to make before we throw it open to the audience? No? Okay, here we are on audience questions. Yes?
Actually, I have a question for you, Gene, which is, have you ever seen anything about the macro level about the percent digitization of, education sector and how that compares to other industries like media or retail and things like that?
Yeah.
I'm wondering where we are in the life cycle.
Yep.
And whether it's going to get easier or harder to do a lot of things that you were talking about.
Okay, so the question is about whether or not we've seen data on percent digitization and where we are on that cycle for education. And it's actually a very hard set of data to gather. And in fact, we just had a conversation about it for K-12 recently and could not find a metric that we thought was meaningful. But let me just go into it just a tiny bit. In general, people tend to think about the kind of market forces that are happening in education as being not unlike what was happening in healthcare back some number of years ago. And some of you are too young to remember, but in many cases, the local hospital had been founded by the local doctors. It might have even been run as a nonprofit, or it was run as a small for-profit. And so the massive consolidation that's happened both on the delivery end of healthcare, and then how that has all been kind of bundled together with this complex funding structure and the need for more data-driven decisions. People would estimate that we're about 2/3 of the way into that, of the digitization of care. And people would say that education's about 10 to 15 years behind. And so people are really thinking this is early days, and that it's the period between now and 2025 where a lot of change happens. I have to say, as a person who's sort of inside reading all the industry journals and all the investment stories about what's going on, we think that the pace is picking up really fast in education, but that's not to say that it's happening as fast as you might think. So back to the K-12 example, just as being very simple to get. Yep, more and more teachers are using online or cloud-based delivery of the product to the student. The student may do the work in a way that then brings it back and it's sort of auto-graded, and the teacher just adds some comments on. And so those kind of things, teacher efficiency that way, are happening. But real digitization, where the content maybe of physics and how you experiment with that in a way that's actually online. We're in the very beginning of those really integrated products. And so there's just a long ways to go on this front. But that said, we would definitely think of the districts as starting to cross the chasm. With LearnLaunch, we're doing a program with Massachusetts districts, and the districts are getting into peer learning groups focused around personalized digital learning as a way to transition their behavior and their ability to become data-driven. And so if you think about an ordinary school district and school board, from today to data-driven, you've got a ways to go. so it was a long answer, but hopefully helpful. I think it's very early days.
Closer to the beginning than the end.
Yeah, although who knows, the AI stuff may come on to us. It happens fast. Okay, another question.
So years ago, I used to work installing in colleges student information systems, and everything back then, I don't know the industry now as well, but it's very siloed. You had registration, you had first hour type functionality, and nothing really blended things together the way, let's say, Workday has done for HR systems. So I'm just curious, you're all building like these things that could pull from the course catalog and things of that sort. So what's it like working with like a student information system to pull in through an API or something like that? Have you even gone down that route yet to try to seamlessly integrate and offer that as a feature to when you're selling to school? Everyone says it's hard to do.
So for ours, we built on the Salesforce platform, which is enterprise. So the beauty of it is that when you go into schools, whether they're already on it or not, it's really easy for them to install apps on this model and keep adding business units as they can, and it is all in the database underneath, so it's already integrated. But if they still do have siloed systems outside that they're transitioning off of, then we can do data integration and apply to those.
So interestingly, we are seeing in K-12 that the two different standards bodies and a number of the very senior players in the K-12 industry are coming together, probably to make an announcement in the next couple of months to talk about trying to do true interoperability in the K-12 system. And if you'd asked all of us 3 years ago, when was that going to happen, we would have said, 10 years at the earliest. On the other hand, in colleges where a lot more money is spent, we still tend to have very, very big structures. I've seen one company that's taking the information out of the silos, running it through Watson, tagging and using it for decision making across the different silos. That's how hard it is. And so still pretty early days. And again, I think when you think about it, the problem in the HR systems is actually kind of simpler than, hey, I want to know something about student life. at the same time that, i.e. which clubs you belong to, at the same time that I want to know, did you finish that course? And is that really on your trend to where you're interested in for a career? But because that's just information that isn't any one place, and it doesn't. It's not even clear that people are going to use anything. Yep.
I mean, I've done both, so I can take it. I think it really depends, but for like a really broad kind of look at it, like most businesses, some colleges are doing better than others. So there's a number of private schools that have, I would say, more money and more willingness to experiment, and their decision making can be really fast. And you know, like UNH, for instance, is I think one of the worst funded, if not the worst funded by the state schools. That's not going to be true for them. So the sales cycle is a little bit longer and it's a little bit harder.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I would just also say, like, it's, you know, I've found that there's less of a correlation between, you know, private institutions act one way and public institutions act another way. It's, to me, such a direct correlation of leadership and like how decisions are made. And if, you know, individuals running different departments have the autonomy that they should have, you know, in my opinion, has a really big effect on success.
Okay, I saw another hand there at some point, but maybe pull it down. We are getting closer to what we said we were going to be stopping, but I think we have another minute or two if we have another question.
I have a comment on the last question, which is the biggest difference that I see between public and private is public over a certain amount, which is pretty small, like $50,000, you have to send it out to an RFP, and that's a huge and terrible process to try to sell through.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see in all of the parts of the world that interact with the public systems is that everybody knows the magic price points, right? So if you want to sell to a school principal in general, they have discretion up to $5,000, and more money than that, you're going to be out for some other kind of decision process. And certainly when you get into the large sales to either universities or school districts, there's big major RFP processes that go on for
It takes years.
well, certainly 6 to 7 months at a minimum, and they're very slow as a result.
Which is years.
Yeah, years in startup. Yeah, believe me, you can starve to death early in a startup. It did in 7 months. But another thing about that issue is that there's no one part of education that's changing incredibly differently than any other. There's just a lot of change, and then sometimes it's teacher driven. Teachers are all about innovation. You know, most people that can think about K-12 system would know that most nights during the school year, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of teachers are going online looking for innovative apps, looking for great lesson plans. I need a lesson plan for 4th grade earthquakes. And sure enough, there'll be a forum from 7 to 8 on Thursday nights talking about innovative tools for 4th grade science. And you go on that Twitter feed. Teachers stay off of Facebook because Facebook is scary, and so you're on that Twitter feed and you're telling people what you need, and there's 7 or 8 products in both the paid market. Teachers paying teachers is a huge place where people are selling lesson plans, or in the free market, open educational resources, huge trend. So there's endless buzzwords to talk about in education, but again, lots of really interesting behavior driven by different parties. Well, I think we're going to have to let people get back to socializing, and I know there's a number of different people who co-sponsored this event, and I'm not going to be able to remember all of their names, but I think we can definitely say thanks to the Sandbox for hosting us here, and for the many organizations that support the entrepreneurship center, support entrepreneurship here in New Hampshire to bring the event together and publicize it and help everybody understand what's going on. So thank you very much.